G'day YouTubers, this is my complaint to the New Zealand Broadcasting Standards Authority regarding the TVNZ program on the drowning of Tuvalu.
You can read the entire complaint and related matters below in the description, but in summary, the only way that TVNZ could not be in breach of the Act would be if imminent catastrophic human-induced global warming and the resultant order of magnitude increase in the rate of sea level rise were of such a high level of certainty that any contrary view could be ignored or given the barest derisory mention. This TVNZ manifestly fails to demonstrate. Now, TVNZ in their response, again you can read that below, uses a number of tactics to assert that, quote, no breach of standard 4 has been identified, unquote.
Propaganda technique number 1, repackaging.
TVNZ rhetorically attempts to imply that the main focus of the program was the King Tides Festival, rather than the one-sided assertion of imminent catastrophic human-induced sea level rise. However, any dispassionate viewing of the program, again you can view it below, shows it to be about the one-sided narrative described above, with mention of the festival a small part of this and done within the same one-sided narrative.
Propaganda technique number 2, we're only the messenger.
TVNZ claims that the program also looked at the festivities and asked people on the street about their opinion on sea level height around the island, and that the views portrayed in the program were clearly the perspective of the people interviewed. However, along with Enene Sopoaga, who TVNZ acknowledges as a former Tuvaluan UN ambassador, the other interviewees included Reverend Tafu Lusama, who often travels abroad, preaching the message of climate change and its effect on Tuvalu, and also lodge manager Penieli Metea, who feels corporations are putting greed ahead of communities like Tuvalu. Clearly, the predominance of interview footage on the question of climate change was not of random people on the street, but for the first two especially, was from those obviously sought out for their professionally established alarmist views. Furthermore, the one-sided alarmism was not confined to the cherry-picked interviewees, but in the long string of catastrophist assertions added post-production by narrator Marama Papau.
Now scientists are saying in just 30 years they might have to find somewhere new to call home. Tuvaluans are already seeing the effects of climate change, with crops affected by rising seawater. Many Tuvaluans feel it's a race against time with climate change.
TVNZ does not address the issue of the narrator's one-sidedness, nor is my observation that the only acknowledgement that there is an alternative viewpoint is to imply that it is confined to the simple and pious, disputed by TVNZ.
Propaganda technique number 3, the evidence for imminent drowning of Tuvalu. This will be good.
We are therefore left with a situation where TVNZ apparently does not dispute that the program was overwhelmingly one-sided, but instead then tries to cobble together a scientific case for imminent catastrophic sea level rise, making Tuvalu uninhabitable within decades. Now, it cannot be stressed too strongly the extremely high standard of extraordinary evidence that this would require. Tuvalu, up to 4.5 metres above sea level, would surely require at least a metre of sea level rise to become uninhabitable, and probably not even then. For this to be achieved within 30 years would require at least a 10-fold increase of the observed 2 to 3 millimetres per year of sea level rise. The Reverend Tafu Lusama's prediction of total inundation within his lifetime, i.e. I want to be the last one standing here, even if it's underwater, would require a 50-fold increase. So what evidence does TVNZ offer for this imminent catastrophe? Number 1. Argument of authority and bandwagon. TVNZ tells us that human-induced global climate change is accepted as uncontroversial by most countries in the world. Now, where they got the idea that scientific truth is settled by a poll of governments is a mystery. However, if they're referring to the so-called scientific consensus on catastrophic human-induced climate change, then the argument also falls down. Facts are not established by consensus, but through cold, hard, reproducible observation, such as of centimetres of sea level rise per year, which is manifestly not being observed. Furthermore, there is much less to the so-called scientific consensus than meets the eye. According to Mike Hume, a prominent climate scientist and IPCC insider, quote, claims such as 2,500 of the world's leading scientists having reached a consensus on human activities are having a significant effect on the climate are disingenuous. That particular consensus judgment, as are many others in the IPCC reports, reached by only a few dozen experts in the specific field of detection and attribution studies. Indeed, the original IPCC assertion that human-induced climate change had been detected was the work of one chapter author, Ben Santer, who inserted the following after the draft had been accepted by the assembled experts. The balance of evidence suggests that there is a discernible human influence on global climate. None of the studies cited above has shown clear evidence that we can attribute observed changes to the specific cause of greenhouse gases. No study to date has positively attributed all or part of the climate change to man-made causes. Any claims of positive detection and attribution of significant climate change are likely to remain controversial. And when will an anthropomorphic effect on climate be identified? It's not surprising that the best answer to that question is, we do not know. And that, of course, was to accord with the political establishment who had already concluded, quote, only an insignificant fraction of scientists deny the global warming crisis. The time for debate is over. The science is settled. Unquote. That's Al Gore. And so the mantra has remained for almost 2 decades. Okay, number 2. They imply that thermal expansion of water is being denied. TVNZ includes National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration material on how warmer air expands water. That is not in dispute. What is in question is the magnitude and rate of such an effect. However, these alleged, quote, hottest years on record are not producing any significant increase in the rate of global sea level rise. Number 3. Splicing incompatible datasets. TVNZ produces a pair of NASA graphs and asserts that they show that, quote, global average sea levels have risen over time at a rate of 1.7 millimeters per year until 1993, when the rate of sea level rise has increased to 3.26 millimeters per year, unquote. Actually, they prove nothing of the sort. The 2 sets of measurement are performed by entirely different methods, one by tide gauges and the other by satellite, and thereby fail the most basic high school science principle of a fair test. The most reasonable conclusion is that the apparent increase is an artifact of these different methods. If there were an actual increase, we would expect both datasets to show an upward concavity. The most up-to-date measurements by both methods show no acceleration of sea level rise within either. Both are indistinguishable from linear.